In this video, I'm taking a look at a sports game that I've had for quite a while. It is called Sports Illustrated Pennant Race. It's by the Avalon Hill Game Company, I believe. And actually came out with two editions. The red one has the 1982 baseball season, and the blue one has the 1983 season. And this game, its claim is that you get to be owner, general manager, and manager, wheeling and dealing to improve your team's pennant chances. So rather than playing out individual games and at bats and whatnot, you basically roll 3 dice twice, one for each team, do a bunch of math and come up with what score that team makes, and then you have the end score of the game. So basically 2 die rolls of 3 dice each, and you do some math, and then you have the score of the game. It does have the details as far as the rosters of the players, and the players are rated in some very broad categories. So the game on its own, I mean, if you're playing solitaire and you like to tinker around, and you want to play out a season for your favorite baseball team, you could do that and you could actually get it all done. I think it was more broadly designed to be used if you were playing a season of like Stratomatic or Status Pro Baseball, and you're just playing like your favorite teams out for the 162 game season. In theory, you could take this game and figure out scores for all of the other teams' games that week. And you could do that. It still would be fairly time consuming. But I mean, today it's kind of been made obsolete by your computer games. For example, one that I have is Out of the Park Baseball. And that allows you to play at the game out pitch by pitch if you want to, or you can play it out at bat by at bat, or you can play a whole day's worth of games with a push of a button, or a whole week's worth of games at the push of a button. So there's no need for a game like this anymore unless you really enjoy the analog nature of it and the math. It does have the players. They have very basic ratings, and the team has overall ratings. And like I said, it's mostly math. Basically, you have to have a red die, a green die, and a white die. And I actually have a black die also that I roll, because from time to time you need a tiebreaker, an odd or even roll. So I just roll that die every time, and if I need it, it's already rolled. But depending on what you get for a die roll, it could be as simple as taking the dice and using them against your team's batting average versus the starting pitcher's rating, and then it gives you the score that you get for that game. However, there is a mechanism that brings in, if you roll doubles on any of the 3 dice, if the doubles involves a white die and another colored die, you go to the power chart. So it has you check the power rating for a position player in your starting lineup, and then you do some more math to figure out how much score you get from that. If you roll doubles, but they happen to be the colored dice and the white die is not part of the doubles, then you use another chart called the speed bench chart. And depending on what the die roll was, it may be checking the speed of a certain position player, or you may be looking at a bench player at a specific position, and you can choose either his speed or his power. And then anytime you roll the 3 dice and it's 10 or less, you use this third chart, which is on the bottom here, called the relief and defense chart. So you make a calculation determining if you need relief pitchers and whether they helped you or hurt you, and you get a score from that. And then you check a defensive position that maybe came into play in the game, and did they, help you or hurt you on the score. And then you come up with the score, and then you do the same thing all over with the other team, and then you have the final score of the game. So sometimes, the die rolls can be very quick, but the claim to fame in this game is the math. You have a lot of math. to do with these die rolls. You roll them once, and then you have the charts. And I'll show you an example here of the charts that I have from the 1983 season. But you've got this is two teams here, Los Angeles and Houston, and they have some overall team ratings. But the starters for each position have basically what their batting average or on base percentage rating is, their power rating, which has more to do with their slugging percentage, their speed, which mostly has to do with runs scored and stolen bases, and then fielding, which is a very a judgment call how the players are rated. Then you have the bench players that might come into play. And then you have your starting pitchers and your relief pitchers, and they have a value based on their earned run average for starting. They have an endurance value based on whether they pitch complete games or not. And then they have a rest factor, so how many days rest they need in between starts without having reduction of their values. And then they have a relief pitching value. So, I mean, that among other things, they have lefty-righty percentages in there. You can have injuries. It actually has a weather chart, so you can have rainouts. There's a lot of little details that come up once in a while in the game. So I actually rated the seasons myself for 1973, 1974, 1975, and 1977. I believe I have them somewhere. So I think what I might do is just play through from the first season that I rated, the 1973 World Series between the Oakland A's and the New York Mets. And we'll just see how it comes out. I will tell you that generally, if you're doing 162 games for a team, with the randomization of the dice and the charts, it tends to come out, fairly accurately. It's believable enough. If you're just playing a couple of games, no. You might have a World Series level team that gets blown out, by an average team. That can happen in a game, but it won't happen consistently. So over the period of 7 games for the best of 7 in the World Series, it's hard to say for sure, how well it will hold up. But I'm going to do this one just as an example, and you might enjoy that. So I'm just going to go through the World Series in 1973, and this is the Oakland A's versus the New York Mets. And I'm just using this game just has the lineups. You don't have to make adjustments if somebody's starting and giving a guy a day off. It doesn't go to that level of detail, and that will come up like if a bench player gets called on by one of the charts. So I'll just go through the rosters. In 1973, the starting lineups for the New York Mets were John Milner at first base and Felix Millan at second base, Bud Harrelson at shortstop, Wayne Garrett at third base, Rusty Staub in right field, Don Hahn in center field, Cleon Jones left field, and Jerry Grody is the catcher. And the noteworthy people, Rusty Staub has a good fielding rating as the right fielder. He and Felix Millan are the best hitters. And the power kind of tops out. There are 3 players that are rated 3 in power. So, they're average. There's quite a bench here. They've got Ed Kranepool, who can play first base or outfield. You get Ted Martinez, can play outfield and infield. Ken Boswell can back up in the infield. You have Duffy Dyer as a catcher. Willie Mays, outfield or first base. Jim Beauchamp can play first base. Ron Hodges, catcher. Jim Fregosi is an infielder. And the pitching staff is for the Mets is Tom Seaver, Jerry Koosman, John Matlack, George Stone, Jim McAndrew. And then in the bullpen, they had Tug McGraw, Harry Parker, Buzz Capra, Phil Hennigan, and Ray Sadecki. And the manager was Yogi Berra, and they played at Shea Stadium. The Oakland A's have a lineup featuring Gene Tennis at first base, Dick Green at second base, Bert Campaneris was the shortstop, Sal Bando played third base, Reggie Jackson was in right field, Bill North was in center field, and Joe Rudy in left field. Ray Fosse was the catcher. And this was the first year of the DH, so Darren Johnson was the DH often for the Oakland A's. However, in the World Series, the DH rule wasn't used, so I won't be using him as the DH. So he'll be on the bench. Also, on the bench, the A's have Angel Mangual, Ted Kubiak as an infielder, Mike Hegan, first baseman, Billy Canigliaro as an outfielder, Rich McKinney as an infielder, and Del Maxville as an infielder. And for the starting rotation, they have Catfish Hunter, Ken Holtzman, Vida Blue, and Bill Odom, and Dave Hamilton. And then in the bullpen, they have Raleigh Fingers, Horacio Pena, Daryl Knowles, Paul Lindblad, and Glenn Abbott. And the manager was Dick Williams, and they played in Oakland Coliseum. So those are just some of the things. What I decided to do, the game's just going to call for players randomly to come up to have an unusual effect on the score. And it doesn't really matter how they're positioned here. And I'm going to use the starters that were historically used on the dates of the game. So that's kind of how it's going to go with this. So on Game 1 is, I believe, played in Oakland, and the Oakland A's start Ken Holtzman as their pitcher, and the Mets are going to start John Matlack. And Holtzman's a very good pitcher. He has his starter rating is 5. That's based on his earned run average. It's very, very good. And he has a high endurance number too, which means he can do a complete game sometimes. And then for the Mets, our starting pitcher will be John Matlack, and he's also very good. He's a 4 as a starter, so the A's actually have a better pitcher here. So what we do, since the Mets are visitors, they get to go first. They roll the 3 dice, and I ended up rolling doubles. I rolled a 4-4-1. So that calls for the center fielder's power. And the Mets center fielder is Don Hahn, and he's got a 0 power rating. He is the worst for power, which really represents slugging percentage, home runs and doubles. So it ends up being a 0. He gets no score out of that. But I also rolled below a 10, so I got to look into the relief pitching, and I have Raleigh Fingers there, and he's a +1. And as the die rolls turned out, it actually was another 0. And then I have the defense of the third baseman that comes into play, and that's Sal Bando, and he's a +0, so he's average. And that gives me another 0. So basically, I actually got a 1 from the team batting, so I ended up with 1 for the New York Mets. Then I go over to the Oakland and I roll the dice. It's a 6-6-4. One of the tie is a 6, so I'm using the chart for power, and it calls for player's choice on the power rating out of your starters. So my best power hitter is Reggie Jackson. He's rated a 5. So I get to do the math on that and add his power into the team batting average against the picture, and then I come up with 4 runs. So game 1 is over just like that, 2 die rolls, and the Oakland A's win game 1 4-1. So going on to game 2, Oakland is now up in the series 1-0, and the Mets are going to be starting Jerry Koosman, and the A's will be starting Vita Blue. So we're going to run our first die roll involving the New York Mets, and nothing spectacular comes up, but I do get a 1 run for the Mets, and then I go to the Oakland A's, and I rolled low dice, so I have to check the relief pitching of the New York Mets. So I bring Parker and Tug McGraw in, which gives me a 0 and a 1 for modifiers. So when I run all the math out, it actually gives gives no runs, and then the shortstop Bud Harrelson actually gives me 1 run. So it turns out to be a 1-1 tie, so I have to roll the dice. Each side rolls a die, and they can add a relief pitcher value, whatever one they want. And so the New York Mets won the die roll. They both had +1 relief pitchers, so it was really a straight die roll. And New York wins 2-1. So after 2 games, the World Series tied at 1-1. I'm going into Game 3. We're now going to Shea Stadium, and the Oakland A's are going to be starting Catfish Hunter, and the Mets are going to be starting Tom Seaver. So the Oakland A's roll the dice first. They roll under a 10, so they got to use the relief defense charts. So the Mets have to use 1 relief pitcher, which is good, and they pick Tug McGraw. And after doing the math, it comes out with 1 run for Oakland. And then we check the defense of the third baseman, Wayne Garrett, and that also comes out to be a 1 run. So the A's get 2 runs, and then I roll the dice for the New York Mets. I also roll beneath a 10 or less, so I have to go with relief pitchers, and I end up needing 5 relief pitchers. I think I only have 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess I have 5, so they all come in: Abbott, Lindblad, Knowles, Pena, and Fingers. So out of all of those, the A's have a good bullpen, so I get a +2 on the modifiers. So it ends up only giving the Mets 1 run. Then I check the Oakland A's defense. This is third baseman Sal Bando, and somehow I've made a mistake on that. Actually, that wasn't a mistake. Bando is rated a 0. He's an average third baseman, and it ends up allowing 4 runs to score. So the final score ends up being Oakland 2, New York Mets 5. And so we go into Game 4 with the Mets actually up 2-1. So this is not exactly how it went historically. And we are still in Shea Stadium and for Game 4. And the A's will start Ken Holtzman, and the Mets will start John Matlack. So Oakland gets to bat first, being the visitor, and I roll a 10 or less. So I end up having to have relief. So the Mets end up having to have 4 relief pitchers. So Sadecki, Capra, Parker, and McGraw all come in. And that averages out to a +1 modifier. And after I do the math from the entire die roll, it comes out to 2 runs. Then I check for defense, and I have to use the Mets center fielder for defense, Don Hahn, and he is actually got a very bad rating for center field. He's a -1, and that ends up giving Oakland 5 additional runs. So between the bullpen and the defense, the Oakland A's score 7 runs. The New York Mets just roll over a 10, but no doubles, so they just use their team batting average against Ken Holtzman's rating, and they score 2 runs from that. So Oakland wins 7-2 Game 4. So as we go into Game 5, the series is tied at 2-2, so it's working out fairly well. we're still at Shea Stadium for Game 5. So the Oakland A's are going to be starting Vita Blue, and the New York Mets will be starting Jerry Koosman. So Oakland gets to bat first, and I roll 3 2s, which means I get to use the power chart and the speed bench chart. And I end up getting Reggie Jackson, because I have player choice on the power, and Reggie's my best power hitter, so he's a 5, and I end up scoring 5 runs from his contribution. And then with the speed bench, I ended up getting the player's choice, so I picked Bert Campaneris on speed. He's a 5. It gives me 5 more runs. And of course, so what I forgot to do was, since that die roll was less than 10, I was also supposed to use speed in defense. And that probably would have added another run or 2. But I just left it at 10, and then the New York Mets roll the dice, and they get exactly a 10, but no doubles. So this is a relief and defense. So it calls for 3 relief pitchers for Oakland. So Darryl Knowles, Pena, and Raleigh Fingers give a +2 modifier, and it ends up scoring out as 0 runs. And then we check the Oakland defense, and that's the second baseman, Dick Green, who's an average second baseman. He's rated a 0. But the math works out to a 0, so the Game 5 comes to an end. Oakland 10, New York Mets 0. And that takes us to Game 6. So Oakland goes into Game 6 with a 3-2 lead in the series, and we are now back at the Oakland Coliseum. And so the starting pitchers today for the Mets will be Tom Seaver, and for the Oakland A's, it will be Catfish Hunter. So the Mets go first, and they roll a die, an 8 with doubles, so they get to check the speed chart as well as the relief pitching and the defense of the Oakland A's. So for speed, we have to use the third baseman, Wayne Garrett, and he's a +2. So the math works out to 1 run from that. Then for relief, the A's only need 1 reliever, so they pick Raleigh Fingers, who's a +1. And after doing the math, that comes out to 0. And for the defense, we have the Oakland shortstop, Bert Campaneris, who's a +0. He's an average shortstop. And that comes out to a 0. So the total score for the Mets is 1 run. The Oakland A's roll a 4-4-5, and it is the speed bench because the 4s were both on the colored dice. And so the bench allows me to pick whoever I want. It's player's choice on the bench. So I'm going to pick Mike Hegan because he's a power level 3. And so I end up getting 2 runs based on that. So Oakland wins this game 2-1, and the game doesn't go to Game 7. Oakland has won the 1973 World Series 4-2. So that's really how quickly you can play out the World Series. I didn't kind of show you how long it took me laboring over doing all the math, but I did have a calculator. It came out fairly historical. I mean, the A's, I think, won the 73 World Series historically in 5 games, not 6. But, I mean, I'm happy enough with the results. And it allows you a little bit of flavor here. You get to see different players that made a difference, either positive or negative, for the score of the individual games. I'm going to be making a second video in which I'll detail the math that I had to do to resolve Game 1 of this World Series. I'll go through all of the steps that I went through so you can get an idea of how much math is involved. And in addition to that, I'm going to also share a mod that I made for the game to deal with fringe players. So you might find that interesting. So stay tuned for the next video on Pennant Race for those 2 things. Thank you, and have a great day.